Yes, bro. Yes, yes.
Okay. It's, how to enlarge this one? Okay. Right. So can we start?
Yes, Prof.
Yes, Prof.
Okay. Okay. So Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera. Good morning, everybody. I hope you already have your breakfast. Okay. Last week we talked about respiratory tract, how the defense mechanism works in the respiratory tract of animal as well as human being, I think, and how what are the factors that affect the defense mechanism of the respiratory tract, both upper respiratory tract as well as the lower respiratory tract. So you have to remember that respiratory tract has good defense mechanism. However, there are several factors that can actually influence the efficiency of the defense mechanism of the respiratory tract. So now let's talk about some of the pathological changes that we can see in the respiratory system. Can we go to the next slide? Right, before we start with the pathology, I just want to remind you about certain things, especially about the respiratory tract of animals that you should understand or you should remember. Okay? There are several considerations that you should consider when we talk about diseases of the respiratory tract of animals. First one, the respiratory tract of mammals consists of two major portions, which is the upper respiratory tract and the lower respiratory tract. Just like I mentioned last week, the upper respiratory tract starts from the nostril until the pharynx, whereas the lower respiratory tract starts from trachea until the alveoli. And the upper respiratory tract have normal flora. That is part of the defense mechanism of the system. And the lower respiratory tract have no normal flora or sterile. And it should stay that way. And there are two major functions of the respiratory tract. The first one, of course, everybody will remember that it involves in the respiration for the gas exchange. The tract will get the oxygen and will expel carbon dioxide from the body. The oxygen comes from the environment, and the gas exchange occurs through the pneumocytes. You probably remember that pneumocyte is the very fragile cells that covers the alveoli of the respiratory system. It is fragile and very small and thin cells for the easy gas exchange or gas to pass through, oxygen to pass through into the capillaries, oxygen to pass through from capillaries into the alveoli. So we have a pneumocyte where the gas exchange happen or gas will pass through. And of course, there is another important structure in the gas exchange. It is called capillaries, found in the interalveolar sector. Numerous capillaries in the lung for the gas exchange. Capillaries where the RBC is located. The gas will pass, the oxygen pass through from the alveoli through the pneumocyte one into the capillaries into the RBC, and the RBC will bring the oxygen to the cells. While at the same time, RBC that comes from the body carry a lot of carbon dioxide, will expel through the capillary wall through the pneumocyte into the alveoli and they expel to the environment. That's how respiration roughly happens. However, you must remember too that another function of respiratory tract is a thermal control mechanism. Many people actually forget about the thermal control mechanism function of the respiratory tract, in which the function of the respiratory tract is to remove excessive heat. Some animals, including human, the major thermal control mechanism is perspiration, sweating, and the secondary thermal control mechanism is respiratory tract. Many animals actually the major thermal control mechanism is the respiratory tract. For example, dogs, for example, so respiratory tract will function to remove excessive heat. If you go jogging, for example, then after some time, the body will break all the glucose in the body to liberate energy for you to run. At the same time, liberating energy. At the same time, it will liberate also the heat. Then it will cause your body temperature to increase. So excessive heat is there in your body, and then soon you will have a faster faster respiration because the respiratory tract is trying to remove excessive heat from your body. So that's how respiratory tract functions. One is gas exchange, the other one is thermal control mechanism. And both functions, if the animal fail to do, then they will die. And please remember that this system works around the clock, never stop. Even when you are sleeping, your respiratory tract still functioning as always. Okay, next. Right. Due to the nature of the functions, the two functions, the system will inhale air from the environment for the oxygen because oxygen is found in the environment or in the air. However, not only oxygen is found in the air, other unwanted material also can be found in the air, including microorganisms and other materials that can cause injury to the respiratory tract. So due to that, there is chances of inhaling of air into the respiratory tract can cause injury to the tract itself. However, structural nature of the respiratory system for the gas exchange make it susceptible to damage, especially the pneumocyte 1. Pneumocyte type 1 is very fragile, and that things because of the easier gas exchange. However, because of that, the pneumocyte 1 is very fragile and easily damaged. So microorganisms usually when they enter the respiratory system, they will target the pneumocyte 1 because that's the most vulnerable cells found in the respiratory tract. Similarly, the lung have lots of capillaries, millions of capillaries, and because of that, the blood will always be supplied to the lung, and it may cause problem to the lung because of the too many capillaries for the good gas exchange. And you always you have to remember that all blood from the world, all blood from the entire body will eventually flow through the lung. Every part of the body, the blood will eventually flow through the lung. So blood, whatever found in the blood, unwanted material, microorganism, toxin, and things like that will eventually arrive at the lung, and that makes lung uh, easily damaged or vulnerable to being damaged. Okay? Like I said before, the upper respiratory tract start from the nostril until the pharynx. It is not sterile, but the lower respiratory tract start from the trachea until the alveoli and is sterile. Next. Okay, therefore the system has the efficient defense mechanism. We have talked about this one before, so I just want to go through. I don't want to discuss in detail anymore. Last week we have gone through this one. The upper respiratory tract have several defense mechanisms. One is the different size of the wound. Second one, sneezing reflex of the upper respiratory tract. The third one is the normal flora that prevent establishment or adherence of the pathogen organism. The fourth one is the goblet cell that produce mucus that dilutes the foreign material or the unwanted material. And the fifth one is the ciliated epithelium found in the nasal mucosa that push the material posteriorly to the throat area before it is being swallowed into the stomach to be killed. Next. The lower respiratory tract have several defense mechanisms on their own. The upper portion of the lower respiratory tract, especially the trachea and the bronchiole and the bronchi and the bronchioles, have goblet cell. Similarly, it will dilute the microorganism, and they also have ciliated epithelium that push the material this time anteriorly to the throat area for the for the for the material to be swallowed and killed in the stomach. The lower portion of the lower respiratory tract have a branching of the bronchioles and of the bronchi that will reduce the air speed uh, and deposit the small size material into the junction area of the branching bronchioles. They also have deep coughing reflex that forcefully remove the material. They have surfactant that cover the alveolar surface. Lots of immunoglobulin, especially immunoglobulin A, that protect the host from adherence of the microorganism to the area, and also they have alveolar macrophage that will phagocyte and kill the microorganism. Okay. Next. Okay, the defense mechanism, is being influenced by three factors actually: the virulence of the microorganism, the stress, and the concurrent infection. Next. Okay, this one, this one you have to always remember when you talk about respiratory tract. There are only two routes of entrance of microorganism into the respiratory tract. Only two. The first route of entry is called airborne or aerogenous route of entry, and the second one is called hematogenous route or blood-borne route of entry. One's through the air, in which you inhale. The other one is through the blood, in which it is always circulating uh, toward the lung. When we talk about aerogenous route of entry, we are talking about damages to the airways, damage to the trachea, damage to the bronchi, damage to the bronchioles, damage to respiratory bronchioles, and damages to the alveoli. So because of the route of entry is aerogenous, the airways will show abnormalities or inflammatory reaction, and it usually end up with patchy type of vision. The entroventral type of vision. I will show you about the entero. Entero means anterior, ventral means ventral part of the lung. So it will have the lesions usually happen at the anterior part of the lung, or at the anterior but ventral part of the lung. Whereas when we talk about hematogenous route of infection, in which infection comes from the blood circulation, you know that the blood circulation blood vessels. There are many blood vessels or capillaries in the interalveolar sector. So, or some people call interstitial tissue. So the damage will happen in the interstitial tissue or in the interalveolar sector where the blood vessels are located. And because of that kind of route of entrance, then the lung will show diffuse type of lesion, interstitial uh, distribution of the lesion all over the lung, not patchy like the intraventral or erogenous route of entry. So erogenous will affect the airways, the hematogenous will affect the interstitial tissue or interalveolar sector. Next. Okay, this is the pattern of damage that happens in the lung when we talk about erogenous route of infection. If you can see on your right side, upper right side of the picture on the right, it is a normal lung without lesion. The normal lung will appear pale or a bit pinkish. You jangan terkejut pula esok tengok lung of a dog very very pale, which is normal. So normal lung of animals or even human, they are pale in color, almost yellowish, sometimes pinkish, slight pink in color. Okay? Whereas if you look at the at the left side of the picture, you realize that trachea, belakang tu trachea, and you have the apical lobes of the lung and the diaphragmatic lobe of the lung. Diaphragmatic lobe of the lung tu bahagian bawah lah of the picture. Look at the apical lobe of the lung. Dia nampak tak? Anak panah. Can you see? No.
No.
No. Well, anyway, look at the apical lobe of the right lung and the apical lobe of the left lung. Those are the inflammatory reaction. They are dark red in color. Happen at the anterior part of the lung. That is what we call antero-ventral portion or antero-ventral area of the lung. So when you see lesion like this, lesion that's happened at the anterior part of the lung, you know that the organism or the foreign material enter through the erogenous route of infection. If you see the lesions all over the lung, small focal lesions all over the lung, then we know that the route of entry is hematogenous. So the erogenous route of infection will produce lesion like this. It will happen at the anterior part of the lung, because once the air enter through the trachea, soon it will divide into two part of the bronchi. One is the left lung, the other one go to the right lung. So when there is branching like that, this air speed will reduce, and most bacteria will be deposited in that area or in the apical lobe or at the anterior part of the lung. Except for very, very, very small viruses. For example, Nipah virus in pigs, for example. So the animal will inhale the microorganism, and because of the smallness of the virus will even flow through the branching of the bronchi into the very deep end of the lung until the apical lobe of the lung. So the virus will affect the apical, the diaphragmatic lobe of the lung. It will go much further down the lung because of the small size of the virus. However, most of the microorganisms, especially the bacteria, when you inhale the microorganism, they will be deposited at the anterior part of the lung. Okay, next. Right, this one just to show you how the normal lung histologically looks like. I'm sure you have seen this one before in your histology classes. Picture on the left, just want to show you the bronchioles. Bronchioles adalah apa tube yang tak ada cartilage. So the left picture shows normal bronchiole with the normal alveoli. Okay. On the right side, just to show you the normal alveoli, look at the interalveolar sector. It is very, very extremely thin. That is because that is for the purpose of gas exchange. It's very, very extremely thin. And can you believe that within those thin interalveolar sector, there are lots of capillaries, and RBC or blood flow through those capillaries. You can even see here that you cannot see even one RBC here, but they are there. So appreciate how how thin the interalveolar sector is. If you see the right picture, the upper portion and the lower portion, there is one thick structure separating the upper from the lower portion. That is called interlobular sector. Interlobular sector, meaning that the upper portion is one lobules, the lower section is the another lobules, and it is being separated by a thick interlobular interlobular sector. So those are normal structure, histological structure of the lung. So appreciate how fragile is the lung, and those are because of the gas exchange. Imagine that people who suffer from infection of the lung, for example, TB, tuberculosis, they will have lesions deep in the lung. In fact, in the diaphragmatic lobe of the lung, and because of that, they will have a very severe forceful cough. They have very severe they have a very severe coughing, and that forceful cough can break the thin alveoli, the thin interalveolar sector, leading to bleeding into the lung, and they will, when they spit, they will spit bloody sputum. That is because the forceful deep cough led to breakage of this interalveolar sector, and bleeding, small bleeding will occur, and it will appear in the sputum. Okay, so please consider about the structure of the normal lung. Understand about the structure before we talk about the abnormal structure later on. Okay, next. Okay, this is another thing which is important, but people usually forget. Malfunction of respiratory tract leads to several consequences. What happens when you have abnormal respiratory tract? These are the two consequences that people tend to forget. Number one, the animal will show poor performance. So less extensive vision in the respiratory tract will cause inefficient gas exchange, leading to hypoxia. The animal will have difficulty in breathing for a long period of time, 2-3 minggu, 4-5 minggu, 6-7 minggu. The inefficient, the poor, the respiratory difficulty actually is caused by inefficient gas exchange. And inefficient gas exchange leads to hypoxia. Hypoxia means less oxygen being supplied to the cells or to the organs. Hypoxia reduces oxygen supply to the various organs and various cells, leading to inefficient metabolism, meaning that the cell cannot break the glucose in the cell to liberate energy. And because of that, it will be a reduced energy output by the cell. So the animal will have less energy. So what happens to the animal with less energy? They will be very weak. Nak bangun pun tak larat. So hypoxia, because of the inefficient gas exchange due to problem of the respiratory tract, will lead to hypoxia. Hypoxia will cause inefficient metabolism, meaning that the breaking of glucose is not efficient, and because of that, energy output is reduced. And because of that, the animal will show weakness. Reduced energy output leads to weakness or inactive or lethargic animal, and reduce in feed intake, and eventually weight loss. So tak ada tenaga, nak makan pun tak ada tenaga, nak pergi meragut pun tak boleh. You bagi makan kat depan hidung pun dia tak larat nak makan because of weakness, and because of that the animal will start losing weight. So problem in the respiratory tract will eventually lead to poor performance, especially weight loss. So animals will show weight loss. Let it be dogs or cats or cattle or goats or swine or whatever, when they have respiratory problem for a long period of time, then one of the consequences is poor performance or weight loss or emaciation, whatever you want to call it. And the mechanism I just explained there. How the mechanism that leads to weight loss due to respiratory tract infection. That's one thing. That's one consequences. The other consequence is death. Of course, right? Severe lesions leads to anorexia. Most part of the lung is affected or damaged, for example, then there will be no gas exchange. When there is no gas exchange, there is called anoxia. Anoxia means no oxygen being supplied, either through poor gas exchange or poor pulmonary blood circulation, or both. For example, if the animal suffer from infection of the lung, for example, there will be no ataupun less gas exchange. So no oxygen being supplied to the RBC. RBC cannot carry oxygen. There is no oxygen for the RBC to carry to the cell. That's one mechanism. The other one is that RBC is there in the blood, but it is congested. The RBC cannot move because of whatever reason. Nanti kita akan discuss nanti. So even though the animal inhale oxygen from the outside, the oxygen fused through the pneumocyte 1, through the wall of capillaries, into the RBC, but RBC cannot move to supply the oxygen to the cell. So there is pulmonary blood circulation, poor pulmonary blood circulation, or poor pulmonary blood movement that leads to the cell cannot receive the oxygen. So RBC ni macam lori lah, that transport material. Kalau lori tak boleh nak berjalan, tersekat kat jalan raya dengan roadblock, for example, then you cannot receive the good. Betul tak? Sama juga if you have the good, but the goods cannot be loaded onto the lorry. Beras ada kat Kedah, for example, lori pun ada dah kat Kedah, tapi tak ada orang nak angkat masuk ke dalam lori. Kita kat sini tak akan terima beras tu. So similarly here, when there is severe lesion in the respiratory tract, it will lead to either poor gas exchange or poor blood circulation, or both. Meaning that gas exchange pun tak berlaku, blood circulation pun tak berjalan. And that will lead to death of the animal. This leads to significantly reduced oxygen supply to the organ or to the cell that leads to multiple organ failure, including the brain. So once the brain, when the brains did not receive oxygen supply, they will die. The animal will be under coma, and soon the animal will die. So once the brain is dead, then the animal is pronounced dead. So you must remember that lung lesions will lead to two consequences. One is poor performance if the lesion is not severe but prolonged, and the other one is death if the lesion is very, very severe, affecting almost all part of the lung, and it is quite acute. Okay, next. Okay, so please remember several things before we go to the pathology. Please remember about the defense mechanism of the reflex. Remember about the factors that affect the defense mechanism of the reflex. Remember the functions of the reflex. There are two functions, and remember the consequences of the abnormalities in the respiratory tract. There are two: poor performance and death. Okay? And of course, apart from those, you have to remember the normal normal structure of the respiratory tract and the normal function. Any questions so far? No question.
No, prof.
Okay,
No.
right. So let's go to the first problem of the respiratory tract. Okay? We start from the upper respiratory tract. We start from nasal cavity. The first problem in the nasal cavity or in the nasal mucosa is called cleft palate. Cleft palate. Cleft palate means failure of the soft palate that separate oral from the nasal cavity to fuse. The palate, kita tahu kan soft palate, orang Melayu kata langit, that separate your mouth from your nasal cavity. Okay? Kalau you tengok kat dalam mulut you tu, kat atas kan, tu the langit tu, that is soft palate. So in cases of cleft palate, that area fail to fuse together. So dia ada lubang. Okay? So there is a hole that communicates the nasal mucosa into the oral cavity. There is no clear separation between oral cavity and the nasal mucosa. That is called cleft palate. Usually, it's a congenital anomaly, meaning that the animal is being born with that condition. So the the palate, the soft palate, fail to fuse together in utero. Sepatutnya di dalam uterus lagi, the soft palate should fuse together and to separate the nasal mucosa from the oral mucosa. However, due to some abnormalities, the animals being born with cleft palate, meaning that there's a hole that communicates the respiratory system from the oral cavity. Communicating oral and nasal cavity will lead to several problems. One is asphyxiation. So asphyxiation means tersedak lah. So the animal probably cough, for example, minum susu. Part of the milk is being moved through the cleft palate into the respiratory system and being inhaled to the lung, and then dia tersedak lah. And it may cause sudden death due to asphyxiation. And the second problem is that it can lead to aspiration pneumonia, meaning that the milk will pass through from the oral cavity into the nasal cavity, being inhaled into the lung. The animal survive the asphyxiation, tak mati lagi, tapi the milk's already in the lung, and later you will develop pneumonia or inflammatory reaction in the lung because of presence of foreign body, which is the milk. That is called aspiration pneumonia. We are going to talk about this one later on. Tapi that's another consequences of cleft palate. One is asphyxiation, tersedak ataupun tercekik. The second one is aspiration pneumonia. The animal survive the asphyxiation, but later develop severe inflammatory reaction against the milk or against the food. And of course, the third one is chronic malnutrition, meaning that the animal suck lots of milk, but only some will enter the stomach. The rest will be expelled through the nose. Keluar balik melalui hidung. So after some time, the animal will be stunted or show chronic malnutrition. Tak cukup makan, walaupun kuat makan. So part of the feed that's been there in the oral cavity will move through the cleft palate into the nasal cavity and expel through the nostril. So the animal will suffer from chronic malnutrition. So cleft palate leads to asphyxiation, aspiration pneumonia, or chronic malnutrition. And this one is quite commonly observed in babies anyway. Banyak babies yang ada cleft palate. Next. Okay, the second problem as far as nasal cavity is concerned is called asphyxiation. It's called epistaxis. Epistaxis means bleeding from the nose. This one is quite common in children sebenarnya. Tapi children pun yang dulu-dulu lah, orang budak-budak dulu kat kampung yang kuat main tengah panas tu. Macam you all ni yang budak-budak bandar ni memang tak pernah lah epistaxis, bleeding from the nose mungkin tak pernah. So epistaxis means bleeding from the nose. Animal may show epistaxis once in a while. It is actually a circulatory disturbance. Of course, bleeding means circulatory disturbance. It is indicative of several problems. Epistaxis ni sebenarnya adalah a condition. Kalau you tanya clinician, dia kata it's a clinical sign of other disease, which is true. Epistaxis is bleeding from the nose. It is an indication of some other problem. For example, severe septicemia or severe bacteremia. Example, in cases of anthrax, it's a disease caused by bacterial infection in ruminant that may lead to epistaxis. Or severe septicemia caused by hemorrhagic septicemia. The hemorrhagic septicemia is caused by Pseudomonas maltosida B2 yang baru-baru ni ada outbreak dekat Terengganu. Some of the animal that suffer from severe septicemia due to hemorrhagic septicemia may show epistaxis. Okay. So first indication is severe septicemia due to bacterial infection. Second indication is the tumor. Tumor that, especially leukemia, for example, that happen in animals, especially pet animal, if you are talking about animal. And in human, if you suffer from epistaxis episodes, banyak kali, kejap, hidung berdarah, kejap, hidung berdarah, sekejap hidung berdarah, duduk dalam bilik aircon pun hidung berdarah, then you should check for tumor. Not only tumor of the nasal cavity, but tumor elsewhere, for example, leukemia. Leukemia, one of the clinical signs is bleeding from the nose. So please remember, if you suffer from episodes of epistaxis, check for leukemia. Or sometimes inflammatory reaction in the nasal mucosa also may lead to epistaxis. If you remember, years ago, 1999, 2000, we have suffered from a very, very heavy haze. Haze, you know, jerubu. Have you gone through jerubu before?
Yes,
Yes,
Prof, a lot of times.
right. So, if I remember 1999, there was a very, very severe and prolonged haze. And many of us actually suffer from chronic inflammation of the nasal mucosa. And some even bleeding from the nose. That is because severe or prolonged inflammation of the nasal mucosa that leads to epistaxis. And of course, ulceration in the nasal mucosa. Some animals suffer from ulceration of the nasal mucosa that leads to epistaxis. And lastly, hypertension or aneurysm. You see ya, dulu kita orang masa kita orang budak-budak dulu, budak-budak ni suka main panas. So because of main tengah panas ni, the the um, the blood vessel in the nasal mucosa, there'll be hypertension of the blood circulation in the nasal mucosa. Hypertension, increased blood supply and increased blood pressure in the capillaries of the nasal mucosa, and that leads to epistaxis. So, dulu budak-budak kampung ni banyak yang suffer from epistaxis once in a while because of hypertension. Dia main panas. Similarly, some people now, bila dia orang, when they have severe fever, for example, high body temperature, leads to hypertension in the nasal mucosa, and they may show evidence of epistaxis. So epistaxis are actually a condition or clinical sign that indicate some other problem. Okay. Next. Fitri, next.
Prof, I think there's something wrong with his internet. Kejap.
Okay.
Sorry, Prof, kejap line Fitri.
Okay.
Sorry.
I need a break anyway.
Prof,
Yes.
I have a question.
Hmm.
For the cleft palate, you mentioned it common in children. So you said that is there any way to to avoid them from malnutrition? I mean, they will get enough nutrition.
That's not a problem nowadays. There's easy. The problem is can easily being treated by a minor surgery for children.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Prof.
Right. Any other question?
Prof, I have a question.
Hmm.
You know, when people they vape a lot and they tend to have the epistaxis can
Yeah.
like episodes of that, and it's because of when they vape, it's because of the inflammation dekat dalam lungs that will lead to epistaxis.
Usually, epistaxis inflammation will usually happen in the nasal mucosa, not in the lung. So bleeding of the lungs, bleeding of the lung will lead to bloody cough, meaning that you cough and you have blood in the sputum.
Ooh, okay, thank you, Prof.
Anything else? No. Okay. If none, let's go to the third, the last problem in the nasal cavity or the nasal mucosa. There's only three problems there associated with nasal mucosa. The third one is called rhinitis. You probably remember in your basic pathology, the suffix of itis means inflammation. Rhinitis means inflammatory reaction in the nasal mucosa. Inflammatory reaction in the nasal mucosa, which is quite common in animals. Okay? And there are two mechanisms for pathogenesis of rhinitis in animals. Number one, we look at number one first. Number one is start off with stressful condition. The animals under stress, for example, transport stress and poor nutrition, for example, ataupun transport stress during rainy season, for example. Oh, by the way, I must tell you that we had a project last time of goat project in which the farmer brought in goat from Australia, several batches. So he brought in the first batch in November. Masa tu rainy season. Dah lah datang daripada naik kapal daripada Australia sampai kat sini bulan November, masa tu tengah musim hujan, tengah musim terpujuk. 70% of the animal died because of respiratory tract infection, die of non-hemosis. Second batch he brought in March from Australia. March pula masa March ni adalah musim panas, tak hujan. So he learned the lesson. So he brought in bulan March. Disiapkan tempat yang sesuai dan makan yang cukup. 10% of the animal died. So see how stressful condition leads to severe lung infection. So similarly here, rhinitis, stressful condition change the normal flora. Certain normal flora will be killed due to stress. And because of the change in the normal flora, it allows the pathogenic organism to come in and colonize that place, the place in which normal flora used to be. One colonization happen, they start to proliferate and they will cause injury to the epithelial layer or even the subepithelial layer of the nasal mucosa. When there is injury or necrosis of the epithelium or subepithelial layer, the inflammatory reaction will happen. You remember kan last semester, inflammation needs necrosis. So once there is injury or necrosis of the epithelium, there will be inflammatory reaction. So that inflammatory reaction in the nasal mucosa is called rhinitis. It's a simple mechanism that leads to rhinitis. Dulu zaman hatuk kita lah mungkin, orang Melayu especially, bila dia orang nak buat kenduri ni, bila anak dia nak kahwin, bapa dan mak dia ni very stress. Not only physical stress but also mental stress. Physical stress because dulu-dulu ni orang Melayu kalau nak kahwin ni dia kena pergi jemput sendiri tetamu ni. Ni mak saudara ni, bapak saudara ni, cousin ni, dia tak boleh nak SMS, dia tak main. Dia orang takkan terima punya SMS. Maksudnya SMS pun tak ada. So they have to go one by one, rumah sana, rumah ni untuk jemput kahwin. That's physical stress. Dia nak kena angkat kayu-kayu ni untuk masak ni. That's physical stress. At the same time, mental stress. Lembu nak cari kat mana, berapa harga lembu ni, kalau lembu ni mati macam mana, belah pengantin lelaki apa ni bila dia orang nak duduk dekat mana. So banyak benda. Gula nak cari dekat mana, beras banyak mana yang cukup nak cari tukang masak dan sebagainya. Those are mental stress. So bila stressful condition like this, it will change the normal flora of the parent. And selepas kenduri, mak bapak kebanyakannya akan rhinitis and sakit tekak, demam. Guarantee. That is because stressful condition. a simple mechanism, stress leads to change hormone flora, leads to colonization of the pathogenic organism, cause injury to the epithelial layer, and inflammatory. That's rhinitis. Second, second pathogenesis is involve the foreign body in the nasal mucosa. So you inhale foreign body. Katalah you naik motor, belakang bas lalu pula tanah, jalan ada tanah, berdebu. So you inhale debu tu, masuk ke dalam nasal mucosa, it cause irritation to the nasal mucosa. When it cause irritation to the nasal mucosa, it will lead to colonization of the microorganism. Or irritation itself will cause injury to the epithelial cell. So when there is injury to epithelial cell ataupun injury to inflammatory cell, it will lead to inflammation. When there is colonization by the pathogenic organism, it will lead to injury to the nasal mucosa and of course rhinitis. So first, stress condition. Secondly, foreign body cause irritation to the nasal mucosa. Next. Okay, so so please remember that rhinitis develop through two mechanisms: stress and foreign body. Okay. Now, when you talk about rhinitis, there are several types or stages of rhinitis. Okay. The first one is called serious rhinitis. This one sebenarnya I'm sure you have studied during basic pathology last semester. Serious rhinitis mean acute, the first 12 hours after the onset. Bayangkan you kena rhinitis, the first 12 hours what happened? There will be swollen nasal mucosa due to hyperemia. Masa tu you rasa hidung tersumbat, blocked nose. The first 12 hours. Okay. There will be a hydrophic degeneration of the epithelium, loss of cilia of many epithelium. The hyperemia due to the start of the inflammatory reaction lead to serious exudate in the nasal cavity with few inflammatory cells. Masa tu you ada runny nose, beringus je, berair je hidung, satu kotak tisu pun tak cukup. That is serious rhinitis. It just started the first 12 hours. Nak tidur pun tak boleh pasal hidung tersumbat. And then dalam masa yang sama, runny nose, berair je hidung. That's the first type or the first stage of rhinitis. Then between 24 to 72 hours, 2-3 hari lepas tu, you will have a catarrhal or mucoid rhinitis. Why? Because there is a marked increase in the activity of the goblet cell in the nasal mucosa that leads to formation of mucoid or mucus. So you have a mucoid nasal discharge. You beringus, dah terpekat dah hidung. That is because increase in the goblet cells activity that leads to formation of mucoid ataupun mucus. Mucus is being excreted. There will be active inflammation in the nasal mucosa with a mixture of mainly neutrophil, if you are talking about bacterial infection, ataupun mixture of lymphocyte and mucus and fibrin. Fibrins come from the blood vessel, mucus come from the goblet cells, lymphocyte also come from the blood vessel due to inflammatory reaction. Then you have a mixture of inflammatory cell and mucus and fibrin, and you will have a mucoid nasal discharge. That is catarrhal rhinitis after 2 to 3 days of infection. Next. Then you have a purulent rhinitis after 3 to 4 days. post onset of the infection. Masa purulent rhinitis developed because of secondary bacterial infection already sets in. So the active goblet cell will remain active. They produce mucus, but the exudate now consists of neutrophils and the dead neutrophil or dead epithelial cells that become purulent in nature. So you must remember that purulent usually is associated with bacterial infection. Purulent usually is associated with neutrophil, live and dead neutrophil mixed with the cellular debris. So here you know that once you have a purulent nasal discharge masih lagi mucoid, but they appears greenish or yellowish because of purulent in nature. Then you know that there's already secondary bacterial infection. If you suffer from purulent rhinitis, masa ni you pergi jumpa doktor akan bagi antibiotik. Dia kata nah makan antibiotik ni makan sampai habis. Why? Because he already suspect that bacterial infection already sets in. If you go and see doctors masa runny nose ataupun block nose tadi, ataupun masa mucoid discharge, clear mucoid discharge tadi, then the doctor will give you ambil ubat sesama, tak ada antibiotik because there's no bacterial infection. But once purulent rhinitis sets in, after a week of onset, kena hidung berair pun tak nak pergi jumpa doktor lagi, sampai keadaan macam ni baru jumpa doktor, then you have antibiotic to finish. And of course, if you are talking about more than 14 days, owners usually they fail to notice their animal having problem. So one fine day they realize that their animal have ulcerative rhinitis, meaning that more than 14 days, chronic reaction leads to severe injury and eventually ulcers in the nasal mucosa. Exudate is similar to purulent rhinitis, but occasionally there will be blood coming out or epistaxis coming out from the nostril due to presence of ulcers. So many people last time bila ada haze yang teruk tu, ramai yang kena ulcerative rhinitis and they show epistaxis. But that's after 14 days onward of infection or of damage to the nasal mucosa. So please remember that rhinitis, there are several stages: serous rhinitis, mucoid rhinitis, purulent rhinitis, and ulcerative rhinitis, depending on the time of infection, how long they are being infected before they can show this kind of changes. Next. Just to show you some of the pictures, histological pictures of nasal cavity. If you look at the left side of the picture, it is hyperemia of the nasal blood vessels leading to blocked nose. You tengok tu kat tengah-tengah tu blood vessel, there are lots of RBC. That is the initial stage of inflammatory reaction. And dalam blood vessel tu pun, among the RBC tu banyaklah ada a few white blood cell yang titik-titik warna hitam, warna gelap ni kan. Those are inflammatory cells that's being supplied to the nasal mucosa due to the injury of the nasal mucosa. That is called hyperemia, the beginning of inflammatory reaction. How hyperemia looks like under histological examination, ada yang tadi. The blood vessel consists of lots of RBC mixed with some WBC. That is because the blood is trying to supply WBC to that area to kill off whatever microorganism that caused the problem. That's hyperemia. At this stage, the animal will show blocked nose. Ataupun you rasa hidung tersumbat. The middle picture show acute rhinitis. Note the presence of inflammatory cells in the lamina propria or di bawah pada epithelial layer. Lots of inflammatory cells, mainly neutrophils and some lymphocytes. That is acute rhinitis. Maksudnya gallbladder cell banyak produce mucus. The third one on the right side of the picture is rhinitis, not the erosion of the nasal epithelium that leads to ulceration. Banyak if you compare with the gambar dekat middle tu, most of the epithelium have been eroded away, and soon the animal will develop ulcerative rhinitis. Next. Okay, clinical sign of rhinitis, very simple. One is nasal discharge, either serious or micron or purulent or even bloody. It depends on the length of the inflammation. Berapa lama dah inflammation itu berlaku, it will lead to this different type of nasal discharge. But once you see nasal discharge, you know that the animal is suffering from rhinitis. And second clinical sign is sneezing. That is a clinical sign of rhinitis. So animals showing nasal discharge or animals sneezing, then it's a clear sign of rhinitis. Okay. There are several diseases that usually leads to rhinitis in animal. The first one is called inclusion body rhinitis. Of course, inclusion body rhinitis is a viral infection in pigs, causing rhinitis and inclusion bodies found in the nasal mucosa. A viral infection. Nanti in your fourth and final year, you are going to discuss about this detail about this inclusion body rhinitis in pigs. However, this one just to introduce to you some of the diseases that leads to rhinitis. Second one is called atrophic rhinitis, another infection in pigs caused by Passerella maltosida, usually Passerella maltosida type D, ABCD, in the nasal mucosa of pig, leading to crooked snout. Dia punya buncung dia tu, hidung dia tu begok. So atrophic rhinitis is caused by Passerella maltosida, usually type D, and it leads to crooked snout of the pig. The third disease usually that leads to rhinitis is called infectious bovine rhinotracheitis, and this is a herpes virus infection in young cattle, leading to fever, but seldom kill the animal. Infection bovine rhinotracheitis belum ada lagi clinical cases dekat Malaysia. Atrophic rhinitis memang banyak dekat Malaysia among the pig population. So similarly, inclusion body rhinitis also have been seen or have been reported in pigs in Malaysia. Next. Okay. So before, those are the three problems of the upper respiratory tract, pathology of the upper respiratory tract that you should understand. The first one is called cleft palate. Second one is called epistaxis, and the third one is called rhinitis. It's a simple one, but seldom this disease kill the animal immediately. Seldom. So problem at the upper respiratory tract will not kill the animal, but will cause problem in performance. Animal may lose weight, may be inactive, may show lethargy and loss of body weight, but seldom they kill the animal unless it's some other problem sets in. That's the upper respiratory tract. Now look at the lower respiratory tract. lower speed track, please remember, is from the trachea until the alveoli. I just want to introduce um, this slide, lower speed track, before we discuss further about the lower speed track. Lower speed track consists of the following organs. Please remember, the first one is trachea, or the airways. The second one is lung. The trachea or the airways consists of trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, and respiratory bronchioles, whereas the lung consists of interalveolar septa and of course the alveolus. Look at the normal lung of animals. Appreciate the very thin interalveolar septa. Look at the picture on the right side, top right side of the slide. Look at how the air flow into the alveoli. The airways kat atas tu adalah respiratory bronchioles. Before they enter the alveoli. See how once they enter the alveoli, the air is being dispersed to the different direction. So once the dispersion of the air like that, the airflow will be reduced, and the microorganism will be deposited mainly at the bronchial alveolar junction, just at the entrance of the alveolus. Selalunya it start off from there. That is because of the flow of the air that carry the microorganism. So when you talk about the alveolus, usually the infection will start at the entrance of the alveolus, not at the end of the alveolus. You start off at the entrance, just at the junction of the respiratory bronchiole. You start there. Okay, next. Okay, so do you want to take a break?
Okay.
Right, 5 minutes break. Nak minum jap. Hello, boys and girls. Are you there?
Yeah.
Can we finish off?
Yes, Prof.
Right. Okay, when we talk about the lower respiratory tract, please remember that lower respiratory tract is strive. And the upper part of the lower respiratory tract, you have a ciliated epithelium, whereas the lower part of the lower respiratory tract is non-ciliated epithelium. Okay? And of course, the upper part of the lower respiratory tract has goblet cell, the lower part has no goblet cells. Okay, the first problem that we are going to discuss is about trachea. Tracheitis and bronchitis. Tracheitis means inflammation of trachea. Bronchitis means inflammation of the bronchi. And it is always due to aerogenous route of infection, either by bacterial infection or by the viral infection. Usually you inhale the organism into the system, not through the hematogenous route. Pathology, it will cause damages to the epithelial cells of the trachea or of the bronchi. It will lead to serious inflammation, later catarrhal or mucoid type of inflammation, and later purulent type of tracheitis or bronchitis, just like rhinitis. The lumen is filled with exudate. The exudate usually consists of neutrophils if you are talking about bacterial infection. It will fill with lymphocytes if you are thinking about viral infection. And it will mix with the fibrins that come from the blood circulation, and of course with discriminated epithelial cells. Those damaged epithelial cells will be sloughed off, discriminated into the lumen. So there'll be a mixture of dead epithelial cell, fibrins, lymphocytes, or neutrophils in the trachea or in the lumen of trachea or bronchi. Next. This is an example of congested trachea because of tracheitis. You see, trachea is consists of rings of cartilage, and in between the ring is actually smooth muscles. So those red thing tu yang jalur-jalur merah tu is actually the muscle in between the cartilaginous ring. So those muscle shows congestion because of inflammatory reaction. This is a case of acute tracheitis in animals, usually due to aerogenous route of infection. The animal inhale certain pathogenic organism into the system, into the trachea. However, you must remember that tracheitis is very seldom. Very seldom you can see tracheitis alone, because the air that's being inhaled will flow through the trachea at a very high speed. Tak sempat the organism nak singgah dekat trachea. They will straight away to the bronchi. So that's why it's very seldom you get tracheitis. Unless the organism have the affinity, dia suka sangat dengan trachea, which is only one or two organisms saja yang suka trachea. Otherwise they are not going to bother about the trachea. So tracheitis is quite rarely observed sebenarnya. Okay. Next. Okay, clinical sign, the animal will show short cough, macam you tersedak, forceful but short cough. Kalau soft short cough ni, you have sore throat, you ada infection dekat larynx for example, then you batuk, soft short cough macam ni. That's orang kata batuk orang kaya. You see, meaning that you have a soft, short cough. However, if you are talking about trachea and bronchi, you have forceful short cough. Macam orang tersedak. Kalau you tersedak, macam tu lah. Short cough tapi forceful. Kuat. Batuknya kuat tapi pendek. Okay. So clinical sign is short cough, emaciation in chronic cases, and death in small size animal. So animal yang kecil-kecil ni macam chick, kalau DO chick for example, they may die because of tracheitis. Otherwise, if animals adult, then they may show emaciation if it is a chronic problem. Some of the diseases that cause tracheitis is infectious bovine rhinotracheitis caused by herpes virus infection, and infectious bronchitis caused by a viral infection in chicken. Next. Okay, so boys and girls, I nak berhenti dekat sini saja. Because after this, next Wednesday, then we sambung dengan lungs. But please remember few things. Number one, the upper respiratory tract consists of three main problems that you should understand ataupun should remember, which is the rhinitis, the epistaxis, and the cleft palate. The upper lower respiratory tract, you have tracheitis and bronchitis. Several diseases specifically affect those areas. However, not very many of them actually can infect trachea and bronchi. Any question that you want to ask before we end? Any question? Yes, no?
None from me, Prof.
So you make sure you understand.
Okay, Prof.
Right. So if there's no question, then we end it here. I'll see you again next time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you,
Thank you so much,
Prof.
Prof. Nice day.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Prof.